President Trump helps light the national Christmas tree, but his gift from Congress will likely be a vote to impeach. I'm Matt Smith, today on Upfront.
The president's not going to be removed, so this is all a waste of time and a waste of the taxpayers' money.
Republican Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner on the process, the president's defense, and what he thinks will happen in a Senate trial. Plus,
takes your breath away.
In your mind, is there anything that could have been done to prevent what we've seen this week? Governor Tony Evers on what can be done after 2 Wisconsin school shootings put communities on edge.
Taking on the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Upfront with your host, Adrian Pedersen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Smith, in today for Adrian Pedersen. An impeachment vote by Christmas. That's the timeline House Democrats are on following Speaker Nancy Pelosi's order to draft articles of impeachment against President Trump.
Our democracy is what is at stake. The president leaves us no choice but to act.
The president called it a big fat hoax. But the process is moving fast. The House Judiciary Committee could vote on impeachment articles later this week. Wisconsin Republican Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner is on that committee, and he joins us now on Upfront. Congressman Sensenbrenner, welcome back to Upfront. Good to have you on the program.
Well, it's great to be here.
You are preparing for yet another hearing come Monday morning. You're going to hear from impeachment investigators. Curious what you would like to hear Monday from them.
Well, I'd like to hear some facts. Not hearsay, but facts. A lot of what went on in the basement and in the public hearings before the Intelligence Committee was hearsay evidence that could not be admitted in any court in the United States. And here we're talking about the grave consequence of impeaching and perhaps removing from office the President of the United States. And that shouldn't be done on hearsay, speculation, and innuendo. Up till now it has been, and unless there are facts, I don't think the Democrats have got a case.
House Democrats released their impeachment document, 300 pages. Was there anything in there that surprised you or raised red flags for you?
Well, no, there's nothing that surprised me, but I think what was very plain is that Adam Schiff did not allow Republican witnesses that could have presented a defense to President Trump, nor did he allow President Trump attorneys to be able to confront his accuser or to cross-examine the witnesses. And any jury in this country would like to see live testimony from the witnesses so they can make a determination on whether the witnesses were telling the truth. And merely looking at a sanitized and perhaps redacted set of transcripts, I don't think is going to be sufficient. Now, I was involved in the Clinton impeachment 20 years ago, and we had a number of hearings where both Kenneth Starr presented his case. There were 2 hearings with academics. The President's counsel were able to cross-examine all of the witnesses, and Mr. Kendall, who is the chief counsel for President Clinton, did a very good job in doing that.
To that point, on Wednesday, moments after the Judiciary Committee gavelled in, you stopped and interjected and asked for a minority day, a day for Republicans to call witnesses. Chairman Nadler said he'll consider that. Is he considering it, and will that happen?
Well, you have to talk to him about that. The rules allow the minority to have a day of hearings and to present their own witnesses. And in the request that I made of Chairman Nadler, as I said, I would like this day to be before the House votes on articles of impeachment, or the committee does that. And it's up to Chairman Nadler to schedule it. But if it's scheduled sometime after the fact, I think that this shows that he does not want to have an alternative view presented.
Who would you like to call if you do receive a minority day?
Well, I'd like to call, first of all, Mr. Schiff. Mueller presented his findings in person. I don't see why Schiff cannot and should not do that. I'd like to call the Inspector General of the intelligence community. His report is all classified, and that can be declassified, and it's important that that's done. And I'd like to call a whistleblower who really does not fall under the whistleblower protection statute as it was written and passed by Congress a number of years ago.
So you are totally comfortable with the whistleblower being publicly questioned before Congress?
This is what started it all, and I think we're going to have the whistleblower be publicly questioned before Congress. You know, what he knew, how he found it out, whether it's direct evidence or whether it's hearsay evidence. And again, hearsay evidence is not admissible when you're dealing with the federal rules of evidence. Hearsay evidence in many cases is gossip. And we're doing something that's never been done in the history of the country before, and that is potentially removing a duly elected president of the United States and reversing the decision that the voters made. Now, you know, I think it's too late in the process to do that now. Next year, the voters will have a chance to determine whether or not Donald Trump stays in office or not, and it should be the voters rather than a bunch of politicians from literally both coasts that want to kick this man out of office and reverse the decision that 63 million voters made 3 years ago.
Does that lend itself to a slippery slope in terms of the whistleblower for other people to come forward in the future who may see wrongdoing and would like to stay anonymous for their own safety and protection?
Well, the whistleblower protections do not apply in this case. So whistleblowers who are under the protections of current law have nothing to worry about. This whistleblower started out something that will result in the impeachment and trial in the Senate of the president. The president's not going to be removed, so this is all a waste of time and a waste of the taxpayers' money. And here it's using the taxpayers' money to influence a political campaign, meaning the 2020 election.
With Speaker Pelosi directing articles of impeachment be drafted, is there any way in your mind this does not now lead to an impeachment vote in the House?
We are told to be prepared to spend the weekend before Christmas here debating and voting on impeachment rather than being back and enjoying the holidays with our families. I think that both the New York Times and the Washington Post, which are hardly sympathetic to the president, are spot on that this should be paused. There should be more witnesses, including Secretary Pompeo, Chief of Staff Mulvaney, Ambassador Bolton, and they can give direct and not hearsay evidence, and then a proper determination can be made. Pelosi is running ahead and playing with less than a full deck, and it seems to me when we're dealing with something this grave, all of the evidence should be out, and both the members of the House of Representatives as well as the American public should make their determination based upon all of the evidence rather than some that has been selectively leaked by people who have been wanting to get Donald Trump right from the get-go.
Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner in Washington. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Coming up.
We have him at gunpoint. He won't take his hands out of his pocket. 516. We're in room 220.
2 shocking school shootings in Wisconsin in 2 days. Next, my interview with Governor Tony Evers.
We've not gotten quite accustomed to dealing with mental health issues in this state. I think we need to kind of kick that in second gear.
Are we doing enough to protect students? Next on Upfront.
Upfront, brought to you by WPS Health Insurance.